Celebrating the 60th Trade Day, President Yoon vows to do more of his sales diplomacy to support exporters and raise young people in the sector. South Korea's economy expanded by 0.6% from July to September on the back of recovering semiconductors and exports. In the Middle East, Israeli forces rapidly advanced into southern Gaza, having mobilized tanks and cut off telecommunications in the besieged area. It's December 5th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. Celebrating 6 decades of South Korea's trade-driven development, the South Korean president today attended an annual Trade Day event held in southern Seoul. He called for the need to foster new ways for the country to grow in a qualitative way. Correspondent Woo Soo-young begins our coverage.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has pledged to level up support for South Korea's export firms to expand in the global market, as he forecasts continued disruptions to international trade and supply chains. Marking the country's 60th Trade Day in an annual ceremony on Tuesday, Yoon stressed the need to create new avenues for growth, as the export-dependent economy faces a rapidly changing world shaped by competing national interests and technological shifts. Citing numerous risks such as the weakening of economies, supply chain disruptions, and geopolitical conflicts, he said the Korean economy must overcome great challenges once again. Having met with over 90 heads of state around the world in 150 summits, as the self-professed #1 salesman of South Korea, he pledged to back more free trade agreements and efforts to diversify products and services. The president also promised to nurture the growth of small and medium-sized firms along with young business people and scrap regulatory hurdles.
새로운 주력 수출 품목을 키우기 위해 세계 최고 수준의 초격차 기술 개발과 상용화를 위한 R&D를 최대한 지원하겠습니다. 그리고 2027년까지 서비스 수출 분야에서 세계 10위권 진입을 목표로 콘텐츠, 관광, 금융, 보건, ICT 등 서비스 분야를 제조업 수준으로 키우겠습니다.
Amid the slowdown of global trade at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by war in Ukraine and geopolitical tensions in the Indo-Pacific region, South Korea recorded 13 months of negative export growth until a rebound in October this year on the back of greater demand for chips. In tackling the challenges ahead, Yoon reflected on the past decades of export-led growth for the country, which first recorded $100 million in 1964.
수출은 늘 우리나라 성장의 원동력이었습니다. 좋은 일자리의 원천이었습니다. 따라서 수출 진흥이 곧 민생입니다. 우리 함께 다시 한번 위기를 돌파하고 자랑스러운 대한민국의 무역의 새 역사를 써봅시다.
According to Korea International Trade Association, the country is forecast to record around $630 billion in outbound shipments this year, down 7.8% from 2022. However, next year, exports are likely to get a boost from higher demand for IT products. Yoon on Tuesday also presented various awards, including the Order of Industrial Service Merit to top export company heads, including Hyundai Motor CEO Chang Jae-hoon. Prior to the ceremony, the president viewed displays of major export items and documents by era, such as the first TV sets and vehicles produced in South Korea, and the first comprehensive export promotion policy in the 60s, which fast-tracked the nation's economic development. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The nation's economy expanded 0.6% in the third quarter of this year, boosted by the chip industry and exports. An Sung-jin has the latest findings.
South Korea's preliminary real gross domestic product for the third quarter of 2023 has increased by 0.6% compared to the previous quarter. Data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday noted that this figure was consistent with the advanced estimate released in October. The increase in the third quarter was mostly driven by a recovery in the chip industry.
Exports and production saw an on-quarter increase for 2 consecutive quarters, and as memory chip prices stopped falling, it can be said that the semiconductor industry has entered into a recovery phase.
This helped pull up the manufacturing sector, which grew by 1.4% as production for computers, electronics, and optical products rose. This also pushed up exports by 3.4% on quarter. Private consumption also saw a 0.3% increase as spending on food services, accommodation, and cultural activities increased. The quarterly GDP growth rate for this year has maintained a similar rate of increase, lingering above the baseline of 0%. Meanwhile, real gross national income increased by 1.6% in the third quarter compared to the previous quarter. Although the net factor income from outside of Korea decreased, as the terms of trade improved, the GNI saw a larger increase rate than real GDP. The Bank of Korea issues its preliminary quarterly estimates on the country's real GDP and income within 70 days of the end of the quarter, with the finalized data expected to be issued within the next year and a half. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Consumer prices here in Korea accelerated 3.3% in November. Inflation has slowed from the month before, but it's been hovering above 3% for the fourth month in a row. Park Go-nu explains.
South Korea's consumer prices went up again on year last month. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 3.3% year-on-year in November. That was the fourth consecutive month South Korea saw a jump in consumer prices of over 3%. But compared to the month before, consumer prices fell, mainly due to lower gasoline prices. Improved supply of agricultural products thanks to favorable weather in November was also a factor that pushed consumer prices down on month. However, sectors including service, agricultural goods, industrial goods, and energy all saw price hikes compared to November 2022. In an emergency economy meeting on Tuesday, Finance Minister Cho Hee-dae discussed ways to deal with increasing prices, but added Korea's consumer prices are stable compared to other regions including the US and EU.
As unstable conditions, including oil prices and the weather, continue, we will do our very best to keep up with special policies to stabilize livelihoods in terms of consumer prices.
The minister also said that the government will strengthen support, particularly for agro and livestock prices, which are still high, with larger discount and cashback schemes until the end of the year. Cho also spoke about ways to relieve the burden of energy payments, including tripling the money back in a gas fee cashback program and boosting energy-saving campaigns more widely. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance minister nominee Cho Sang-mook has pledged to create a dynamic economy. During a press conference today, Cho said that a dynamic economy was necessary to achieve sustainable economic growth. He called for continuous scientific and technological developments, deregulation, and structural reform to create such an economy, which he dubbed as the key phrase for future economic policies. Cho, a former chief economic advisor to the president, will double as the deputy prime minister if he succeeds Cho Kyung-ho, the incumbent who is expected to step down to run in the general election next April for a National Assembly seat. Amid delayed urea imports destined for South Korea from China, sources now suggest a curb in shipments next year. Against this backdrop, Beijing has reportedly expressed willingness to continue its supply chain cooperation with Seoul. Moon Hye-ryun has more.
On top of recent delays of urea imports destined for South Korea from China, there could also be a curb in shipments next year. According to China's Nitrogen Fertilizer Association on Tuesday, its biggest 15 urea-producing companies, including Sinochem and CNAM PGC, have agreed to cap their exports to 944,000 tons in 2024. The NFA stated that urea shipments from China will come to a halt until the first quarter of next year, leading to the possibility of a reduced supply to South Korean firms. Chinese media have also reported that urea exports have been temporarily suspended and that the supply will decrease significantly before Chinese New Year's Day. This comes following reports from Korean companies that there have been disruptions in their ordered urea supplies passing through Chinese customs, which was confirmed by the South Korean government. The chemical is used as fertilizer in farming and is a key fluid used to reduce emissions from diesel vehicles. More than 90% of urea used in South Korean diesel vehicles in October came from China, and between January and October alone this year, urea imports from China totaled nearly 3.4 million tons. Seoul's Trade Ministry consulted with Beijing over these delays and reported that they were the result of a tight domestic urea supply rather than having a political background. Chinese authorities reaffirmed this message by expressing their hope that supply chain cooperation between the two countries would continue smoothly, adding that it would seek a solution to customs clearance issues. The two countries' trade authorities also held a joint committee meeting on Tuesday to speed up negotiations for the second phase of the free trade agreement. Urea prices hit a 2-year high in China last month, and concerns have spiked over the possibility of a repeat of the 2021 supply shortage when China halted all urea exports. The South Korean government reassured domestic firms, saying that there was currently enough urea in stock to last around 3 months. They will also be seeking ways to diversify import channels. 문혜련, Arirang News.
South Korea and the EU have expanded and reformed its original vice-ministerial-level industrial policy dialogue so that it could also discuss supply chain cooperation. The first South Korea-EU supply chain industrial policy dialogue was held on Tuesday with First Industry Vice Minister Chang Yong-jin and Kirsten Yorna, a Director General at the European Commission. Discussed were ways to deal with the global supply chain crisis and industrial technology leaks, and ways to cooperate on the supply chains of batteries, eco-friendly cars, and chips. During a summit in May, South Korea and the EU had agreed to broaden their dialogue. A set of initiatives was unveiled today to change the way South Korea treats and views mental health to halve the country's already high suicide rate within 10 years. It'll encompass more comprehensive aftercare and more proactive measures. Cho Soo-young with the details.
With South Korea ranking first for suicide rates among the OECD countries last year, the Ministry of Health and Welfare has unveiled new initiatives that aim to better deal with mental health issues. President Yoon explains that the plan is all-encompassing.
특히 저출산 시대에 국민의 정신건강 문제를 해결해서 개인의 역량과 삶의 질을 높일 때 국가 성장을 견인해 나갈 수 있습니다. 정부는 예방치료 회복에 이르기까지 전 과정의 지원 체계를 재설계해서 정신건강 정책의 패러다임을 획기적으로 바꿔 나갈 것입니다.
To improve old mental health policies which focused on after-the-fact treatment and not on prevention, the new approach is more proactive and highlights 4 key tasks. Firstly, the government aims to build a system that's integrated into daily life. This involves launching mobile mental health checkups via the messaging application KakaoTalk and integrating the suicide prevention emergency hotline under a brand new number 109. They also plan to increase counseling support for young people at universities and in workplaces. Secondly, there'll be swift and continuous treatment and management of severe patients. The government also will increase financial support for outpatients care by keeping in touch with those who have had severe mental health problems. As for the long-term strategy for people with severe mental health issues, there'll be better housing support for economically independent living. They will also be officially recognized as a socially vulnerable group, and more people will be eligible for medical insurance, even if they have a record of mental health issues. At the moment, some insurance companies don't offer cover to such people. Lastly, they will improve awareness of mental illnesses to dispel prejudice. Efforts will be made through nationwide campaigns and university club activities so that mental illnesses are seen in a similar way to physical ailments. The Minister of Health and Welfare Ministry Cho Hee-dae says that with bold investments in mental health care, it will build a society where everyone can integrate. Though a specific start date hasn't been revealed, though these four main strategies, the government plans to provide psychological counseling to 1 million people by 2027 and reduce the suicide rates by 50% within 10 years. Cho Hee-dae, Arirang News.
The National Assembly began a two-day confirmation hearing on Tuesday for Cho Hee-dae, the nominee for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Cho, a judge with over 30 years of experience, had previously served as a justice on the top court for 6 years. The ruling People Power Party is calling for a swift approval of the nomination amid the prolonged vacancy of the position, while the main opposition Democratic Party is calling for a thorough inspection. The nomination requires a majority attendance of lawmakers at a plenary session and then a majority approval of those in attendance. President Yoon nominated Cho back in November after the appointment of the previous candidate, Lee Gyun-yong, was voted down by the opposition-controlled National Assembly. The position of Chief Justice has been vacant for over 2 months. In the Middle East, Israeli soldiers are rapidly advancing into southern Gaza. As their defense chief vows, his forces will stay in Gaza until all Hamas infrastructure is destroyed. Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
The Israeli military, which has taken control of most of the northern part of the Gaza Strip, is now quickly formalizing its ground offensives in the southern region. According to the AFP on Monday, dozens of Israeli tanks and heavy equipment were observed entering the area near Khan Yunis in the southern Gaza Strip on several occasions. Several witnesses in southern Gaza also told AFP that they've seen tanks and other armored vehicles moving towards southern Gaza, showing Israel is set to begin a full-fledged offensive in the region. In a statement released by Israel's defense ministry, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said Monday that the Israeli army will storm the entirety of Gaza City and the northern part of the Gaza Strip until all Hamas infrastructure is completely destroyed. He also said that the military will remain in Gaza until all Hamas infrastructure is eliminated, and went on to say that the military has begun to work in the south of the Gaza Strip. In the meantime, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he was surprised by the resumption of hostilities between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip and urged both sides to respect their obligations to comply with international humanitarian law. Guterres also expressed concern that people in Gaza had nowhere safe to go and appealed to Israel to avoid further action that worsens the already catastrophic humanitarian situation in the region. He added that civilians and civilian infrastructure, including medical staff, journalists, and UN personnel, must be protected at all times. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Extreme weather conditions are being witnessed in different parts of the world. Moscow has recently seen a record-breaking amount of snowfall in more than 140 years, while East Africa has been hit by heavy rains. Cho Hee-dae tells us more.
Temperatures in parts of Siberia plummeted to minus 56 degrees Celsius on Monday. Forecasters in the region said temperatures would feel like more than minus 60 given the wind and humidity, and that they could fall further overnight. Temperatures of minus 50 have become less common in recent years because of climate change, with permafrost showing increasing signs of thawing. In the Russian capital, some of the biggest snowfall ever seen blanketed the city, causing disruption both on the roads and to flights. According to city officials on Monday, at least 54 flights were delayed and 5 more were cancelled at Moscow's 3 largest airports. Snow depth on Monday exceeded 40 centimeters, marking a level unseen in 73 years. Authorities deployed over 135,000 people and around 8,000 pieces of equipment to clear up the snow. According to the Russian Hydrometeorological Center, Moscow on Sunday posted a record snowfall of 10.7 millimeters in 12 hours. That marks the highest amount of snowfall recorded in the center's 145 years of weather observation. Temperatures in Moscow and the region around the capital were forecast to fall to about minus 20 later this week. Meanwhile, Eastern Africa has been hit by unexpected floods. In Tanzania, heavy rain on Saturday was followed by landslides which have claimed at least 63 lives. In Kenya, at the end of November, 120 people lost their lives due to the heaviest rainfall in a century, while in Somalia, over 100 people were killed because of adverse weather conditions. The eastern part of Africa has been grappling with severe drought in recent years, but starting in October, heavy rain and floods attributed to the El Niño phenomenon have caused widespread disasters. 정은주, Arirang News.
The UK's popular music magazine, National Music Express, published the 50 best songs of 2023 on Monday, and K-pop group NewJeans placed second with the song Super Shy. NewJeans charted the highest among Korean artists, with the song being praised for making 2.5 minutes feel like the giddiest pop ride of your life. Other Korean artists on the list included DJ and producer Peggy Goo, K-pop girl groups LE SSERAFIM and G-Idol, alongside boy band NCT's subunit Do Jae-jung. American singer-songwriter Lana Del Rey topped the list with her song A&W.
The weather is relatively mild for December. For Seoul tomorrow, highs will be topping out at 10 degrees Celsius for the daytime, far exceeding the previous year's temperature by 5 degrees. Temperatures will rise a little more. Much warmer winter conditions are expected to continue throughout this week. However, fine dust will raise its head. Smoke from overseas will flow in overnight, and the concentration of fine dust and ultrafine dust in most parts of the country will increase tomorrow. The ultrafine dust is very harmful to respiratory health. Please make sure to wear ultrafine dust masks. Tomorrow, winter rain with thunderstorms and gusty winds are in the forecast nationwide from the afternoon to overnight. Morning temperatures in Seoul will start off at 5 degrees Celsius. Highs in Seoul will get up to 10 degrees, Daejeon and Daegu 13 degrees, Gyeongju and Busan 16 degrees Celsius. After the rainfall, the weather will get warmer. Seoul will see its highs at 15 degrees later this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.